Hello and welcome to Recruiter 360 TV with me, Toby, and delighted today to be joined by Luke Sutton. Luke, how are you?
Very well, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. Luke is one of the foremost agents in the country at the moment. You work from all ranges of things, from sports to media and TV and production. Tell us a little bit more about Activate and what you've been doing, and your background to it as well.
Yeah, well, actually Activate is nearly 12 years old now, and it started as a kids' holiday camp business, believe it or not, and actually that still takes up about 30% of our business, and the business grew from there, and back in 2011 we started a talent management arm, which I obviously look after mainly, and that's kind of exploded over the last, 6-7 years. And that now takes up about 30% of the overall business of Activate.
Yeah. And Activate's arms there when you talk about talent management.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this beforehand. There's a whole range of people you're dealing with, right? Tell us a little bit about more the philosophy behind that.
Yeah, I really enjoy working with different people in different areas, different sports, TV, entertainment. I think you can learn a bit from everybody, and I think a lot of talent agencies are very streamlined. They tend to be in one sport or two sports for good reason. They want to be experts in that territory and they know it, and they want to kind of stick to what they know. I have a different way of looking at it. I just enjoy the variety, and I think you can learn from one sport, can learn from another sport. And I've seen stuff on TV which I kind of think you could actually take into cricket or whatever it might be. But the overall philosophy is really to keep the client base small. I try and work with high-end clients, the best of the best, to be honest. And I'm whatever field they're in. If I think that they are really elite, then I think that's the type of person I want to work with. I look for young players or young TV people who I think can get to that grade. But generally keep the numbers low. Have very, very close relationships with them. I mean, really, I'm very close to all my clients and invest a lot of time and love and with them. And I'm really passionate about what I do and how we go about it. I think it brings the best out of everyone. Yeah,
I mean, look, you'll have heard this, and it's not particularly original as soon as I say it. But whenever anyone thinks about your industry, you think of the Jerry Maguires and all this sort of stuff, and that sort of close relationship with the client was what that film is all about, right? Taking it over to recruitment and our industry, the whole concept of really working for me with a candidate and understanding that candidate and giving them the very best service that you can do is foremost. And when I saw something you wrote a little while ago about one of your clients, you saw them as a younger brother. That sort of relationship is really powerful, and it's been a huge part of what you do. Tell us a little bit about your client philosophy and how you deal with talent in that sort of space.
Well, high-end people, elite people can be awkward people to deal with. They have characteristics which makes them very good at what they do. But you have to invest time in them. You have to understand them as people, understand their family, people around them. You really have to I have to feel it with them, feel their career, feel their emotion, the ups and the downs, and kind of make them feel reassured that whatever's happening in their life, I've got their back. But to have that relationship, you have to get close to them and you have to invest a lot of time. And but I think that's what works. It makes you vulnerable in what you do, because if it breaks down, it's painful, and it's it's a bit like having a divorce, but I think that's the way you've got to go about it. And I do, I know the client you're talking about. I do see him as a younger brother, but I see other ones as brothers or sisters, and I'm incredibly close to them because I think that kind of connection with them and what makes them tick is so important.
You talked there a little bit about understanding, and our original strapline as a business was excellence through understanding, because I see it as exactly the same parallel. Look, for us to understand our clients, for us to understand our candidates, you've got to ask 1,000 questions, and not just the obvious ones at the surface, but dig a lot deeper. You've got to understand their hopes, dreams, aspirations, take them on the story, understand where they want to be, who they want to be, and how they want to get there. that sort of questioning, that sort of understanding, how does that work for you? Is it just being with them, or is it you mentioned understanding the family, which I think is a really important aspect. People in our job don't often think about what it means to everyone else in there. It's just about what it means for that particular person. They're very, very good at talking at people and taking them on the journey they think they should be on, rather than the ones which they really want. How do you dive into that a bit?
Yeah, well, I think what you just said then at the end is really important. You have to understand the journey they want to go on.
Yeah.
And you have to make a decision whether you want to go on that journey with them.
Yeah.
And I try and spend time with, if I meet a young potential client, he or she might be kind of anywhere between 18 and 22. I'll spend time with them away from their environment, go and have dinner with them, coffee, go to their house, meet their mum and dad, have dinner with their mum and dad.
King of the living room.
Yeah, a bit of pressure on that, yeah. But just try and understand their life and what their upbringing and everything that's gone with it, because it tells you so much about what the journey's going to look like. And then also go and see them in their environment. If it's a gymnast, go and watch them train. Go and see what it takes, because we can kind of go, oh, yeah, I know what it would be like to be a professional footballer or whatever it might. But do we? Do we? And I think you have to kind of get to know them to understand what they're about, how they tick, and then how that's going to translate into the journey they want to take. And I often say to clients, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And don't put boundaries there for them. A lot of them don't have boundaries. They'll just shoot for the stars, and don't make them feel silly about doing that. Be like, yeah, come on, let's go for it. Let's do it.
So what happens if there is someone there who says this is their path, and your expertise and having seen all this sort of stuff knows that it's the wrong path for them, and it's conflicted? What sort of pushback do you put on that sort of thing?
I would probably, if I thought it was worth it initially, I'd try and caution them against that. I'd say I'm not sure about that. But ultimately, if I wasn't comfortable with it, I wouldn't work with them.
Yeah.
And because I know that in the long run you'd have a problem. Yeah. You wouldn't be on the same path. You'd have this conflict, and I'd just pull out early.
So that integrity of you knowing what and where you want to do and what right looks like is really important to you. Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
The other side that we've been talking about is the whole concept of high performance. That's been the theme of all the recruitment, Recruiter 360 programs that we've done about what great looks like. And I guess in your position as well, as having looked at so many different sports and seen so many different areas of sport and showbiz and other areas, you see the good and the great of where it was. Look, even in yourself, and you look at your career beforehand. For those of you who don't know, Luke had a stellar career at the top of the English cricket game, and captained some of the top counties in the country, and had a really good career in that sort of space. So you made it to the top of something there, which is incredibly difficult to get to, and to forge a career out for as long as you did with it is exceptional. So I know you'd probably be far too modest to talk about that sort of aspect, but it gave you the opportunity, and you've seen and worked and talked to people there who've been at the very pinnacle of the various different industries. You think you've got the key to seeing that straight away, right? What does it look like?
Well, I don't know if I've got the key, but I think
you can trademark it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've just been around elite performers a lot of my life, and so and definitely in the work I do now, because they let you in, you see everything. The good, the bad, the strengths, the weaknesses. You see it all, and I think you can. I think you can see traits in someone who is a potential elite performer. They're obsessive about what they do, absolutely obsessive, to the point that they are self-obsessive, because it is about what they want to achieve. Makes them quite hard to be around, and partners and can find it tough, because they are just so driven to what it's about. I think they're very process driven. So especially in sport, high emotion sport, we see that celebration or whatever it is, a goal or a wicket or an amazing gymnastics routine. But actually, if you pull it back, that athlete hasn't walked into that emotionally. They've walked into it very process driven. It's like, I've done this a million times. I know what I need to do. I need to do A, I need to B, and then they have the emotion output at the end. So very, very process driven. They don't have boundaries. So they will dream, they will see as anything is possible. And that in my job, that's quite tough, because sometimes they'll say, you know, can you go and get me this? And I'll be thinking, this is impossible. But I know that they're not gonna accept that as being like that. I think the other thing that I would say, I met a young cricketer recently, actually, who just made his England debut. Yeah. And I asked him the question, you know, how did you feel? He debuted at Lord's. Yeah. You do your research, you'll be able to work out. I said, you know, how did you feel when you went out to bat? Yeah. And he said, I just felt like this is where I should be. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. That's the key. You get people who are very talented and you know, could be very good at what they do, but in that moment where millions of people are watching you, it's at stake. Yeah. Those elite people, they're like, I belong here. This is my domain. And you know, I played cricket at a decent level. I didn't have that in the same way that, you know, a Jimmy Anderson or whoever. When they're in their domain, they know that's where they belong. And that's, where do you think that comes from? Is that sort of a grown thing, or is that sort of that sort of confidence comes from ability? But there's lots of people who have ability who have, you know, on the other side, that constant fear that they're not good enough within that sort of thing. How's that get managed? I think they're born with it to an extent, but they're very. I think we're all sensitive to the environment that we're in. If they've got good people around them who are constantly, you know, reinforcing that for them, then they feel a confidence in themselves and and what they're about. And the whole kind of, you take it back and you go, they're very process driven. If they've done that process, Johnny Wilkinson, you know, when it comes to the drop goal, he's done it a million times. So literally, he has. Yeah. So when he, yeah, exactly. So when he's there, you know, he's not intimidated by it. He knows, like, this is my time to deliver. Yeah. And so I think they're born and they're predisposed to have that kind of sort of show-off type mentality. That sounds a bit negative. I don't mean it like that, but you know, they're like, I love it that everyone's looking at me. Yeah. But then behind it, they've cultivated this environment which has said, you know, listen, just concentrate on the process. Yeah, yeah. And they've been obsessive about perfecting it. Yeah. And when it comes to do it, they're ready. So this comes down to, I talk about this all the time in the office. The whole score takes care of itself. There's a great book by Bill Walsh. Yeah. The 49ers fame in American football, which talks about that whole thing of, you know, you look after the process, the score takes care of itself. I've spoken to people now for well over a decade at the sort of top of everything they do, from business to military to sport. And one of the most common things that I hear, surprisingly, about high performers in anything is about systematic processes that allow them to do what they achieve. And I think it's that ability to not be bored by that, but to embrace that sort of thing that seems to be so important with people who do really well. Why do you think people have that ability to see the process? That I couldn't agree more with you. You're absolutely right. They enjoy the process because that's the bit they're in love with. Yeah. So they concentrate on you know, they'll see it as a craft. So if it's trying to learn to bowl a different delivery or a new skill, that's the bit they're in love with. Yeah. So that's the process. Yeah. So they go and they're very much in the now. You know, they want every day at training that's the thing that they love. Yeah. And so that's where it is, you know, for them. And you know, if they concentrated on the outcome, like you're talking about, if you concentrate on the score, it can become too overwhelming. You know, I've got to score 100 at Lord's or score the goal at Wembley, whatever. You know, that's a big thing. Yeah. So actually, if they just pull it back into the now, every training session, I'm just trying to learn this craft, process. It just takes care of itself. There's an interesting thing about that, and I think it sort of exacerbates itself, particularly with cricket. So. We've worked with a sports psychologist in our business for quite a long time. He's worked with business and sport, a guy called Simon Hartley. He's worked with Yorkshire Cricket for quite some time. And he talks about this whole concept of the 100 and how people sort of clam up in their 90s and the nervous 90s as a concept, and then how quickly people are out just after. And that sort of, you know, you see it if I'm a bit of a cricket nerd about various bits and pieces, but that 100 to 110 and how many people get out between that sort of number after they've just been in for that long is incredible, right? And it's the concentration of building themselves up to a number which could be 36 or 45 or whatever it might be within that. That comes down to, again, that whole concept of overthinking stuff and relaxing, keeping that good, and that's why you see some of the great players move on, you know, to doing that. It's one of the hardest things. So in recruitment terms, it would be the same sort of process of
looking at the board. So you have whiteboards where you put your numbers numbers up on in most recruitment businesses. You start to look at and judge yourself exclusively by the deal and what you put up at the end of it, rather than the process of doing it right. And I was quite interested about what you're saying about the art form. So the art of recruitment for me is the interesting part of it, about how you're dealing with the sparring and the issues and the detail, and how you can make the perfect person look perfect for the perfect client. They might be perfect, but they might not look it. So how do you sort of bring that sort of stuff together? In your job, it must be exactly the same sort of thing, right? Trying to make people there and we spoke about it before, bring the heat to it. There's one of my favourite sort of other agents out there is Ari Gold from Entourage, a sort of fictional character. But the whole concept there, he says in this sort of mock book which I wrote about, was bringing the heat to their client base. How do you bring the heat to people who you're talking about? How do you make them the hot property in their space?
Yeah, I think you've got to understand what they're good at, what they're strong at. You get guys who be very charismatic in front of camera and can speak brilliantly and come to life. Get them in front of camera as much as you can. You get other guys who might look amazing but might not have that charisma. Get them off camera, have still photos of them. You've got to know kind of what you're dealing with. Perception and how, in my job, how you engage with the media might be a better way of saying it. How you use the media to work with your client. The media spaces, they have to write something or they have to put content out there. Well, if you engage with them and help them with that content, you've got a better chance of it being content that you're going to be, happier with. Whereas if you don't engage with them, well then they still have to fill the space, and if you don't like it, you can't complain. So if you're trying to bring the heat to a client, you've got to be smart like that. You've got to know what bits of media they need to be in at the right time and how they need to look in that media. And I often think people in my profession who don't pay attention to that, they fall short because they don't get it.
So it's an interesting thing about your profession. If you were to sort of try and box a few of the areas which you think makes someone great at talent management within your space, and were to say, right, these are the keys to the job, what would those keys be?
Well, first and foremost, it's managing somebody. It's having a personal relationship with that person and being able to get on well with them and to understand them and what their fears are, their hopes are, and everything. That won't be any different to what you do. The best at what you do will be, you will understand people and what they're looking for and all of that kind of stuff. And that's the same.
And how do you see that in people? When you're looking for people to grow your business, like say you've had a successful business now for 12 years, in a hugely competitive space, right? When you're looking to bring people into yours and you're judging for that, that's not an easy thing to interview for, right? No,
very difficult, I look for people who are creative, who, not necessarily kind of, they've done a degree and believe that they kind of know it, not knocking degrees at all, but people who are kind of prepared to look outside the box a little bit and not be overawed by that. In what I do, often, people can be high profile. It's the hardest thing. You bring someone into the business and they're a bit in awe of this person. And I don't need that. I need them to kind of work with them. But it'd be exactly the same. You get that sense of someone, whether they're able to connect with someone. They're not a robot. They've got this kind of compassion and empathy and understanding. That's the important part of it.
Empathy is a really important word,
massively,
isn't it?
Definitely.
Because there's a lot of people there who are quite one-dimensional and transactional, and I think the same in our space as certainly within yours is that transactional business approach to what you're talking about is where people screw it up. And I think if you've got that ability to empathise, to understand someone else's thing and to take a little bit, I imagine, for you, it's exactly the same as anywhere. People like to throw out and have tantrums at various different stages about, important parts of their life, their career and all that sort of thing.
The empathy part is huge. If you're, in my case, you're dealing with a young person who might behave in ways which are not always, you might not like it. They might have a tantrum, or they might be awkward or rude to people. Part of my job is helping them, grow up and educate them. And in sport, often elite performers have been in sports since they were 16 years old. They've no concept of the real world. I had a client I'm not going to mention him, but he laughs at this story. I rang him about 5 or 6 times, and he never rang me back. I left messages, he rang me back. And eventually I got hold of him. I said, why didn't you ring me back? He said, oh, I just knew you'd keep ringing me.
Yeah.
And I said, do you know that in the normal world, if I ring you and you leave a message, you'll ring back? But he'd never been around that, so he just, you know, was this impression that because they're the most important person, that they'll eventually, you know, you just get hold of them. So, but in doing what I do, if you don't empathise about where that's coming from, you'll just lose patience and you'll just go, do you know what, I'm done with it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do have a bit of empathy to go, okay, actually this person has not had real world experience, I need to help them and educate them, and if a tantrum's come, where did that tantrum come from, what's it about, then you can walk it back with them and you help them develop as people. And I think if they develop as people and you're part of that development, your bond is, you know, way beyond however much money you make. It's a completely different level.
Yeah, and you talk about that quite a lot, don't you? You talk about the sort of purpose of what you're doing and how you go through that, and doing things the right sort of way. So it goes back to that whole Jerry Maguire sort of thing that we're talking about there, doing it right and being, you know, doing the right thing for people. Whenever I read about high performance people, high performance environments, there's a purpose that's aligned to that. How do you tie that into what you do?
I think partly for me over the years I've kind of developed how I want that purpose to the business to be. So I do want that integrity there. I do want that close relationship. I want to do good work for a client, but that also doesn't mean that you're some sort of you know, do-gooder saint that you know, it isn't going to mix it in an aggressive commercial world. You know, sometimes they can. It sounds like we were a bit too whitey white to kind of mix it with and in you know, particularly in football, you're swimming with the sharks. So you know, you've got to mix it with them. So for me, over the years, it's developed, and actually, what I have realised is by having you know, working with integrity, working closely, it makes commercial sense, and that's really important because I don't lose clients very often. Yeah. They feel emboldened to be the best they can be, the best people they can be. They make more money. Yeah. You make more money. The business operates better. Yeah. So there's actually the way to marry the two together. You know, and I think, I don't know how it is in your industry, but in my industry, there's this kind of myth that, you know, you have to be this hard-nosed, kind of horrible agent in order to make money. I don't agree with that. Yeah. I actually think if you're a good person and people enjoy working with you, both clients and brands and media, it actually makes commercial sense.
Do you know what? There's a really interesting aspect to that, and I hope, you know, some of the people watching will recognise this. That, you know, when I first got into this industry, one of the things that we would quite commonly turn people down at interview was because they're too nice. So you see people and think, right, they're too nice for this job. I heard it said again recently about someone who's had a really good career that they, you know, when they first saw that person, they thought they were too nice for it. For me, that sort of thing is. I'm just reading a book at the moment about the Fijian Sevens team, who are seen as the nice guys of that circuit. I think it's a really important thing to be nice. I think it's a really important thing to do the right sort of thing at certain stages. And when we kicked off this business, we wanted to be nice people to do business with. Do you remember there's a jingle that used to be on the radio back when I was growing up, which was nice people to do business with, about Curry Motors, and it's always stuck with me ever since that I think, you know, when you tie back in a people-related industry, you want to deal with nice people, and this industry has been very, very strongly about, right, okay, you've got to be there and you've got to look after number one and be in there. It's been sharp fests as effective, and I think it's completely wrong. And I'd love to hear how you've done that and built that up and, you know, doing it. I think that, you said, right, okay, it's not being white, but some of the sort of philanthropic sort of things that you've done and achieved are amazing, right? I've been to balls that you've hosted, which have made fortunes for people. You still talk about the schools and everything you've done there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
No, not really. No, I just want to. I just want to be proud of the work I do. You know, I don't. You know, it sounds really. I don't know. I feel a bit uncomfortable talking about it, but I just like to feel good about what I do and what work I'm doing, whichever way it works. I think the whole, you know, do we think Roger Federer is a nice person or not? Of course we do. Yeah. You know, he behaves immaculately. Yeah, we're talking about one of the greatest tennis players the world's ever seen, maybe the greatest. Yeah. You know, the whole myth and around you have to be some sort of ruthless, you know, assassin.
Yeah.
People can have that characteristic within them at the right time, but they can still be a good person. That applies to you and I. Yeah. And you know, I think you just want to be proud of the work you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in terms of those aspects of what you've seen in great people, so you go back through some of that focused and complete dedication and passion for something. Do you think that's something which could be anything for those individuals, or do you think it's something which they sort of do born out of love?
No, it'd be anything.
Yeah,
they would be. If they weren't, playing cricket, they'd be playing golf. They'd be. It's an ability to hyper focus, obsess on the challenge and the how do I do this bit? How do I get better at this? That if that's in somebody and is then nurtured and cultivated and encouraged, they will find whatever. It could be business, and I definitely feel like it even a little bit myself. It's helped me in business that I can be obsessive about it, and it makes you hyper focus, and for that period of time you're right on it. It can be anything.
Yeah, and that's where you talk, in the business aspect, you've been around these sort of people, as you say, for most of your adult life, and seen the very best, in loads of bits and pieces. Has that rubbed off? And
yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you couldn't but feel a bit of it back, and you spend enough time with these people, you talk the same language as them. Yeah. And the winners do talk the same language. They don't deal with failure in a way that people who don't come back from failure, they see it as learning. Yeah. And they don't, they learn, they something doesn't work and they move on, and you can't but help go with them on that. Yeah. I love being around elite people because it's inspiring.
Yeah. That's an interesting aspect you talked there about the dealing with losing and we see things in cricket. I can't remember who it was. Who smashed the window at Lord's where they're throwing
Matt Pryor.
Matt Pryor, wasn't it? Yeah. So that's that sort of aspect of one of my favourite quotes, much as my wife's discussed, is the old Lombardi one of "You show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser." That sort of aspect of how you deal with just what you see it a lot. You see a lot of people smacking their pads as they're walking back to the pavilion and throwing stuff around and don't come near them once they're out for a bit and need the chance to cool down. What's the difference between that passion and that sort of intensity of not liking to lose or hating to lose versus that sort of concept of dealing with it and moving on to the next sort of phase from it?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Yeah. You can be a bad loser, and I think most people who desperately want to win, I'm sure we'd be the same. Losing hurts, but it's how you react from that. Yeah. And the people who make it to the top, they don't see it as being the end. They see it as being just, okay, this is just, I need to learn from this and I move on. Yeah. Max Whitlock, double Olympian, he had for his standard, had a poor Commonwealth Games. I heard him in the interviews straight away afterwards, and he said, I've learned 3 or 4 things from these games, I'll take it away and I'll move on. I mean, he was devastated of his performance, but you're listening to an elite person. He's just gone, okay, that didn't work, I move on here. Yeah. And it's that reaction to failure, whereas you'll see it in everything you do. There'll be people who didn't quite work out for them, and they're moaning about it forever. And surprisingly, they never move on.
Poor me.
Absolutely. And I also think the interesting about recruitment, the kind of the numbers on the board, and same in sport. As much as you can do your bit and you do your job as well as you can, sometimes it's out of your control. And if you lose that perspective, it can crush you, because if you feel like everything is in your control, then every time you have that first failure, you're like, I'm terrible. This doesn't work. I didn't get the number on the board. I didn't get the score I was meant to get. Whereas I think if you're able to have that perspective of like, I do my bit, but there is other things out there which someone might change their mind, or someone might take a brilliant catch, or whatever it might be. It gives you perspective to go, okay, it's fine. Go, ebbs and flows, and I move on.
That force majeure aspect to it is really important, isn't it? And how people then sort of, I had the conversation today about the whole concept of someone who takes some knocks and then almost doesn't feel the success when the success comes, because they're so worried about the next sort of part of it. It's I find it difficult myself. Look, we've had a great month, and then suddenly it's like you enjoy that for a second. It's there. Great Olympians talk about it all the time. 4-year build-up, have the Olympic slump straight afterwards, where it's like, what's next? And I've done that, and you know, is this all there is to it? It's a really interesting psychology, that sort of aspect, isn't it? And how you then sort of keep going, building yourself up from that aspect of when things are going well, but equally when you can't buy yourself a deal or you can't buy yourself a run and all that sort of stuff, and the whole psychology of how those sort of motivation spirals sort of happen, and how you can just be...
Yeah, but I mean, I know I manage an Olympian who had that after an Olympics.
Yeah.
He won an Olympic medal, and he dreamt about winning an Olympic medal. He won an Olympic medal, and then for the month after the Olympics, it was the worst month of his life.
Yeah.
And he couldn't pick himself up from it.
Yeah.
And the thing I would always say to everyone is, because you've lost track of what makes you happy.
Yeah.
So if you'd sort of focus, this medal is everything.
Yeah.
And the medal comes and goes. You know, the feeling comes and goes. But actually, what he's in love with is the process.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going back to learning a new skill, you know, but getting better at whatever it is. Whenever that person brings it back into the now and forgets about the score, they get back in love with it.
Yeah.
But if you're so attached on the end result, when the end result's come and gone, where'd you go?
Yeah, exactly.
Nowhere.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so I want to ask you a question I ask everyone at the end of these interviews, which is the whole concept. Look, if you had someone here and you're talking to them and they were in sport, or if they were in recruitment or whatever it will be, any sort of business, and you say, look, here's one bit of advice I can see from all the people you've been around and all the things you've learned over the last 12 years and beyond, and before that for your whole career and the top of the cricket game. What would be the one bit of advice you'd give people?
Learn quickly.
Yeah.
I think there's that kind of thought that I definitely had it, that you have to go into something and be perfect at it really quickly.
Yeah.
I just don't see that. I think it's all about experience. You know, just get yourself into it. Some of the most successful people who've worked for me have come in as, making coffee, but they have just learned quickly. They make a mistake, they learn. Make a mistake, they learn. And they just keep progressing. And I think that's what I would say to someone. Don't come in and think you've got to get this perfectly. Just come in and learn as quickly as you can. And every mistake you make, don't worry about it. Move on. Yeah. Move on. There's an element of that someone has to stay humble, because if you don't stay humble, you don't carry on learning because you think you've got it mastered.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that approach in sports management, talent management, you can't go far wrong, because you're not going to get it right all the time. You're dealing with so many moving parts. You know, a moment in sport can change a person's career, an injury or a silly thing they put on social media or whatever it can be. It can change like that. So many moving parts, and if you're in there striving to, like a robot, to get this perfect, it's not going to work. You've got to go in and go, I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to learn really quickly, and you'll be all right.
That's a really interesting. I talk a lot about the iterative journey, and how one of our core values as a business is Kaizen, continuous improvement, continuously looking to do stuff. And there's so much feedback every single day, and people either use it as a stick to be beaten with, or they use it as something which they can use to get better. And people are so worried sometimes about making mistakes in environments, they don't push themselves out of comfort zones. And I think if you're there and can embrace mistakes and pick those things up and not make them over and over and over again, which is the other side of that. It's a massive part of it. So I 100% agree with you.
But I'd just add, you have to create the environment for people to not be frightened to make a mistake. You know, and for them to go, listen, it's fine, go for it. If you make a mistake, it's fine. We'll learn and move on. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's a really interesting point that comes directly back to the industry that I'm in, where we used to have people who would fake statistics all the time, and we always used to point the finger at them and say what they're up to and all that. And this goes back 15 odd years or so, and there were people who'd fake their phone times, and they'd phone the speaking clock over and over again in a day, and they'd leave the phone off at lunchtime, so it would clock up another hour's worth of phone time and things like that. And you think, well, what on earth would someone do that sort of stuff? And what an idiot they are. And you think about it, it's exactly the other side. Environment. The environment was that people were getting sacked for not doing their numbers on a day by day, so it created this environment of fear. Mistakes would be ridiculed as opposed to held as a learning opportunity. And I think I learnt a load from that sort of time about how you can do something where hopefully in this sort of thing people will try and do things with integrity to do it the right way, and if they make a mistake they don't suddenly bury it, but sort of say, right, how can I make sure we're doing it again? How can we celebrate the mistakes? There's loads of great examples from sport for me about where people have sort of really held up and celebrated the losses, as even more so. I think Clive Woodward talks about this a little bit, doesn't he? About
Learn more from a loss than a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important aspect to, to have from it. So, yeah, agreed completely.
Brilliant.
Luke, absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
And thank you to all for watching. We hope you've taken a lot from it, and we shall see you again, hopefully, on another episode.
Nice one.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
See you soon.